Hi, everyone. I recently gave this talk at the Kansas City AI meetup and just wanted to get a quick recording so you guys could see the same talk. I am Nate Allen. I make things with computers. That could mean visual arts. I like to make generative art. I've made music. You can go to my SoundCloud. I've made video games in the past, but usually that means software. I'm a software engineer, really, by trade. But for a little bit, I actually taught people to make software. I taught people to become software engineers at the Turing School in downtown Denver. But more recently in my career, I've been an engineering manager, helping teams develop and deliver software. So let's start with a story. Imagine you've gone to a restaurant, you sit down at the table, and you notice there's no menu. And you look around for one of those QR codes, and there also isn't one of those that you can scan for a menu on your phone. And when the waiter comes by, you say, "Hey, I'd like to see a menu." And the waiter says, "But, sir, we don't have a menu. You can order anything you like here." Now, just to be clear, this is not a magic restaurant. They don't have infinite food. They have a fridge with food in it. They have a kitchen staff that they're very competent. They can probably make anything you ask for. They're going to be better at some things, worse at others, faster at some things. Now, some of you may still be excited by this, to be freed from the shackles of the menu, to be able to order anything you like. Some people may be confused by what's about to happen with their meal, and some people might get frustrated by the results. I would argue this is the experience a lot of people are having with ChatGPT. And I think Chat is a great demo. It shows off what these large language models can do, the breadth of things that they can do. But really, Chat is just an interface. And maybe it's not always the best interface. So let's take a look at some interfaces. So these are not tools that I've built or anything. These are some tools I found on the web. This first one is Goblin Tools. This is the formalizer. So this will let you select a tone from this dropdown. It will let you choose how much you want the text to be affected. And you can just type in anything. Let's say I recently saw a friend in a play. I loved seeing you in the play. Um, this is not really the text that I want to send. I want to be really encouraging. I want to really show how much I loved their performance. So I'm going to select the more passionate. And so this allows me to create some text that maybe I can send to them in a text or an email, or maybe even just like give me some ideas of what to say to them the next time I see them. Oh, how my heart soared with unrestrained joy when I laid my gaze upon you gracing the stage of that bewitching theater. And it appears this goes on for a few paragraphs. So, sure, we maybe if you've played with ChatGPT, you know how to get this kind of thing. I didn't have to think about putting it into a question. I just typed what I wanted to type, select the tone, and click convert. But I think one of the coolest parts of Goblin Tools is actually the magic to do. So this is a pretty standard to do list. I can add items, I can edit them, I can check them off. What makes it magic is if there's a task that, yeah, it's a clear to do task. I know when I can check off buy a car. It's after I've bought the car. But maybe I know that there are more steps along the way to get to that car, and maybe it's been a while since I've bought a car. So I can actually just click on this breakdown item. And what it's going to do is take just that information I've typed in, just the name of that task. And what it's going to do is it's going to break it down into more tasks and just put them right into my to-do list. There's no copying and pasting, there's no formatting. And again, these are items that, just like any other to-do list, I can move around, I can edit, I can check off. That's goblin.tools. Recently, I was writing some content, and I was doing a lot of copying and pasting in and out of Google Docs. And I was really just looking for a tool that would let me edit text and do some GPT related things right with the text, and a little bit of Googling, and I found writer.me. So you can see this is a pretty basic text editor. I've got all my sort of formatting things up here, and I can just type any old text. But what the first thing that makes it interesting is we have a bunch of different use cases for text over here, things you might want to write. And there's a whole drop down here. To demonstrate, I'm going to choose the business idea pitch. To me, a business idea should be, a business pitch should be inspirational. And the idea I've typed in here, an AI assistant that can manage your calendar, buy your groceries, and do your taxes. So I click this button, Write for Me. Again, you may be sort of familiar with using ChatGPT for something like this, but now I have text right in my editor. Now, this is just starter text, as often things are with AI. I can come in here and I can edit anything I like. Or if I type something and I'm not really happy with it, when I select a sentence, there are little changes I can make using GPT to actually make a change to this. I can just click this improve button and it's going to take another stab at that sentence. And if I'm getting really fancy, if I feel like I'm limited and there are things I feel like I can do with Chat GPT, there is a command button right here. And I can just type in whatever command that I like and send that in. So that's right about me. Now, I'm a software engineer, and I want to learn how to build these kinds of things of my own. I've built web apps and mobile apps for most of my career. So, how can I build my own applications that utilize generative AI in the background like these? So, let's take a minute to talk about frameworks. So you know what frameworks are. Some web application frameworks I've used a lot: Django, Ruby on Rails, React is a quite a popular front end framework. Frameworks, I love frameworks. I've used them my entire career. Frameworks are efficient. They have code organization. I don't have to think too hard about where to put my code. I don't have to think too hard about where somebody else might have put a piece of code. They have tools to help you build and deploy, to keep things running in production and find bugs and check performance. Other common tasks are done, and I don't have to become a security expert, right? All I have to do is I use their login system, their permission system, because they have put in those best practices. I can be relatively sure my app is secure. Frameworks are collaborative. They're typically open source. They are built by the community to an extent. Anybody can contribute to them. But even if your contributions aren't accepted by the main package, you could build a module on top of it. Since all the code is out there, you can build new tools that other people can download that can sort of build up the framework that they need. The skills you learn in a framework are transferable. After one project, I'm going to know that framework for the next project. If I want to move companies, I can move from company to company. If I am hiring, if I'm staffing up a team and I know what framework we're going to be using, I can look for people that have those skills and know that they're going to be able to be productive as they join the team. Frameworks are cross functional. You typically have maybe engineers that are more front end or more back end, or even sometimes more database or DevOps. But because they all sort of know the same framework and they can all interact with their part of the application without stepping on anybody else's toes. And I would argue, even if you aren't an engineer, if you're a designer, if you're a product manager, you start to learn the lingo, you start to learn the capabilities of that framework, and it helps you communicate with your team. This is just a quick list of some frameworks that I've found Googling around. I'm not super familiar with all of these. A lot of these are new, but this is maybe a place to get you started. I do want to talk about these last two, LangChain and Semantic Kernel. I believe that these two are kind of getting some traction, and I believe they might be onto something. They might be getting some popularity. So I just kind of wanted to break down a little bit about the differences and a little bit about how you might end up using them. LangChain they're more of the scrappy startup. They're funded, they're out of San Francisco, but also when you go to their documentation page, there's a lot of 404 errors and things are constantly changing. It is not yet sort of at its 1.0, but I would consider them more friendly to open source, at least in comparison to Semantic Kernel. They are really trying to build connectors into all kinds of APIs and data stores, as well as all of the different LLM options, all of the different models that are coming out open source and otherwise. You can write your application in Python or JavaScript if you choose LangChain, and they are offering a paid deployment system to help you get your app out into production after you're finished with it. Semantic kernel actually comes out of Microsoft, and they modeled that framework after what they learned building GitHub Copilot, which I think is actually a really great pattern. I think a lot of great frameworks were just applications that had been well designed before, and then they took kind of the scaffolding, the bones out of those things, and they created a framework that anybody could use. Now, it's going to favor Microsoft tools like Azure and their cloud and other things. It's going to favor OpenAI to some extent. Microsoft is highly invested in OpenAI, and there's some specific functionality that for both Azure and OpenAI. But you can use this with any of the open source models out there as well. They would prefer that you write in C sharp. The C sharp version is sort of getting new features more quickly, but you can write your application in Python. And just last week, they announced experimental Java support. Talk about some of the concepts and jargon that you're going to run into with these new frameworks. Prompt templates. We all know that you use a prompt to get something from one of these large language models. These templates that you design allow you to take specific information about and from the user, or maybe even just you want to look up the weather or something like that and add that to the prompt. You can do that. You're typically getting that data from a connector, is what LangChain calls it, skills on the Microsoft side, to get information in, but also to get information out, whether you want to write information to a database, send something to an API to affect something on behalf of the user, you can. Concept of chains is really just a simple way to define a step-by-step generation process. Maybe you need multiple prompts to get there. There's this concept of memory. So if you're building a chatbot, that's typically going to be prior conversation, but it could be really any sort of prior interaction with the user. Memory is often used with vector databases, which are a fairly new concept and pair with large language models in an interesting way that I'm sorry I'm not going to get into here, but you should Google around if you're interested. They effectively allow you to get some of that memory, some of that context using a new kind of semantic similarity, we'll say. And a big one that's actually really exciting and interesting, and we're really kind of seeing people experiment with, is the agent, or again, Microsoft calls theirs the planner. And this is where you give the AI a description of the task that it needs to complete and a description of all of the different skills and connectors and information it has access to. And it takes a stab at executing that task step by step without you defining programmatically how it's going to do it. Look, I could be off base a little bit here. Chatbots are everywhere. Natural language is flexible and powerful. It's something that we've been chasing as computer engineers for a long time. Both the writer interface I showed you and GitHub Copilot that I mentioned, on top of the interfaces that they give you, there is a chat window. But I don't think that we should give up on the graphical user interface, the visual feedback that you get, having spatial relationships between things on the screen, that ability to select things with your mouse, drag and drop, all those things are hugely valuable in interaction with any software. And these are familiar interactions to the user. They've seen all of these things on their desktop, on their phones, in their mobile apps. And maybe more importantly, it's familiar to the teams that are building this software. They don't really have to change how they think through building software. They don't have to change their whole process of designing products. They learn some new skills, some new frameworks, and they can pretty much unchanged use their existing process. That is all that I wanted to cover today. As of right now, I am available to help you and your team learn more about these things. If your team is busy or maybe you don't have that team, I'm also happy to help you build something. Thanks so much, everybody.